Hi, my name is Kate Olson. I am a performer and educator, saxophonist, and woodwind specialist based in Seattle, Washington. Today, I thought I would talk a little bit about my composition process and how you might enjoy getting started in jazz composition. I thought it would be a good idea to use some of my own writing as examples during this video so I can talk about my own process because it's the process I know the best. So you'll be watching some snippets of live performances that have taken place over the past couple years and some live streams that have taken place during the pandemic. My composition process is really about improvisation. As a single line instrument player, I often base my compositions around the melody. Sometimes I'll sit down at the piano and I will find some chords that are inspiring to me, but a lot of times it's me finding something on my instrument that feels compelling to me, that gives me enough energy and enough direction to want to turn it into a fully fledged song. In this way, my composition practice is really a practice of improvisation. I do a lot of free improvisation and experimental improvisation, and I think that works its way into my compositions as well. My composition Shoulda Coulda takes a 4-note motive and develops it throughout the entire song. One of the easiest ways to get started as a composer in the jazz idiom is by taking existing pieces of music and basing your new compositions off of those. The following example is a tune of mine called All Pear-Shaped, and I'll talk a little bit afterwards about what really inspired me to write this song, but Thelonious Monk is one of my favorite jazz composers, and his tune Well You Needn't is the basis of the form and the feeling of this particular composition of mine. My tune, All Pear-Shaped, was inspired by the sound of pears dropping off of a pear tree and landing on a slanted roof, rolling down, and eventually squelching onto the ground below. I hope that you can hear that in the way I wrote the melody. But like I said, Thelonious Monk is one of my favorite jazz composers, and I really tried to model the sounds that I was using off of his tune, Well You Needn't. There's a chromatic bridge section. The tune is AABA 32-bar song form, and I tried to get the same kinds of sounds that I was used to hearing from Monk's compositions, which included whole tone scales, augmented chords, and that chromatic bridge section. There are two jazz forms that are so popular that you should really familiarize yourself with them if you haven't already. The first of those is the 32-bar AABA song form, which is almost every jazz tune, quite frankly, everything from rhythm changes to any number of standards, and also the 12-bar blues form. The next example that I wanted to give you is my tune Way Out. This tune was inspired by the idea that you can weigh too much or too little to be an astronaut. So you might be born particularly tall or particularly short and not be able to join the space program. Now that's kind of a goofy premise for a song, but I also wanted to make a play on words with the title. Way out is also something that we say about jazz tunes that are perhaps less melodic and more experimental. So this tune, Way Out, starts, it's a blues, but it starts with alternating bars of 4/4 and 5/4. There are a couple 3/4 bars thrown in, and there's no chord structure. Everyone in the band plays the melody together. But then, when we start improvising, we go back to a standard minor blues walking 4/4 swing feel. I find that one of the easiest ways to make my own compositions sound fresh or new or creative or different is to take one of those standard song forms, like a minor blues, and bend the rules a little bit. So we start out with something that maybe doesn't sound exactly like a minor blues, but then we set up this expectation that the whole song might be a little bit strange, and it feels really good when we drop into that 4/4 walking section for the improvisation. My guess is that no matter how dedicated we are as jazz musicians, all of us listen to genres of music that wouldn't be classified as jazz. I'm a huge fan of funk and rock and experimental music and electronic music, so I often let those types of music influence the sounds that I use in my compositions. The next example that I wanted to share with you is a tune of mine called Bridge to Nowhere. It starts with an open E minor groove and continues in that way pretty much through the entire song, from these elongated A sections that only have 2 chords in them, all the way through a 1-chord improvisation. The interest in this song is created by different textures that are improvised by the musicians themselves, as well as different effects that I'm using on my saxophone. I employ guitar pedals as my effects, and I'm able to get some really interesting sounds as an improviser when I'm using those pedals. I also bend the rules a little bit in this song, and again, I'm making a play on the title. Bridge to Nowhere is called Bridge to Nowhere because there's a contrasting bridge section that comes in at the very end of the song. That's the only time we hear it, and it's actually an outro. It's almost more like a coda, but this is the contrasting section that I would normally call the bridge. We could have included that section as a part of the first head, but I chose to leave it until the very end to make the song sound kind of exciting and give it something totally different. And anyone that's in the audience that understands how jazz forms work, understands that a bridge is a contrasting section in a piece of music, is going to get a little extra enjoyment out of the joke. Of course, I'm not the first jazz musician to use elements of funk and rock to influence the way that I write music. Miles Davis and records like Bitches Brew were instrumental in integrating these types of music into jazz, and we call that jazz fusion. The last tune that I'm going to share with you today is my composition entitled So It Goes. It's kind of a lullaby, it's kind of a gospel hymn, and it was inspired by Kurt Vonnegut's novel Slaughterhouse-Five. I am an avid reader and consumer of all kinds of art, honestly, and I find a lot of inspiration in the work of great writers, great painters. I hope you enjoyed this little foray into the kind of music that I write, and maybe it'll give you some ideas for your own compositions. If you want to be a part of the jazz tradition, one of the most instrumental things that you can do to develop your own sound and your own career is to write music. Use your creativity to find your own voice. You might have noticed that I've been name dropping famous jazz musicians throughout this entire recording. And the bottom line is, if you want to be a good jazz composer, you have to be a good listener of jazz as well. You should spend as much time as you can checking out new recordings, and when it's safe, go out again and see live music.